Good evening and welcome to the Poulsbo City Council Workshop of June 10th, 2026. That's why we're meeting down here at the tables in our workshop format rather than up at the dais. Am I right, Councilman Fitzpatrick? That's why we're not at the dais. So, Poulsbo is committed to being a welcoming, diverse, and equitable community where all people can access tools and opportunities to improve their quality of life, allowing them to reach their full potential. And during this workshop, the Poulsbo City Council will use this lens to inclusively view its discussion and actions. And I'm going to call on Councilman Rick Eckert for our land acknowledgement, if you would, sir.
Yes, I would. Poulsbo is located on the ancestral lands of the indigenous Suquamish people, for whom this place was known as Tuktuk Lots, or the land of the vine maples. And then we have a quote from Chief Seattle, the 1854. Every part of this soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished.
Thank you, Councilman Eckert. Those of you who can, would you please join myself and the City Council and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first item is agenda review, and our agenda will stand as presented. And I wanted to add a quick comment. Next week, a proclamation will be distributed to council on the Juneteenth celebration and recognizing. But Councilwoman Crow and I will be attending, in fact, the Juneteenth event in Bremerton on Saturday morning, reading and providing this first copy of the proclamation. So I just want council aware of that, then we'll have it in the packet for next week. The agenda stands as presented. I don't think we need to take an action on the workshop agenda on that. And so the next item will be public comment. Comments can be made in person. Please state your name and limit your comments to 3 minutes unless additional time is granted by council. And as a rule, the council will not respond to public comments. Written comments can be mailed to the city clerk's office by 2 p.m. the day of the meeting, and they will be distributed to council before the meeting, but written comments will not be read into the record. So I'm calling for public comment. Calling for public comment. If you would, come to the podium and state your name and place of residence.
My name is Linda Pawson, and I am here on behalf of Poulsbo Historical Society as their executive director. First of all, I was absent from last week's meeting, but I would like to thank Mr. Mayor, several members of the council for your very positive comments about Liberty Bay Festival. As many of you know, and I hope a lot of you got to experience 2 weeks ago, we were able to bring an entirely new reimagined Liberty Bay Festival to our community. We had multiple historic vessels in port. We had presentations on historic events that had happened that impacted the city of Poulsbo. We had many visitors. According to the first placer results, we had 6,000 visitors to our waterfront park that weekend for the 3 days of the festival. So we are quite pleased to call it a success. Part of that is due to the LTAC funding that we received in this last grant cycle, and I'd like to particularly bring to everyone's attention that that was a large ask, and we received a generous amount for advertising and marketing, but we did not receive any for the rest of our requirements. And the Port of Poulsbo and Poulsbo Historical Society were able to make a lot of that up with sponsorships, donations, and in-kind donations. But we do have a deficit, and that's unfortunate for a nonprofit trying to bring something new to our community. And I know that LTAC has been a hot topic of discussion, particularly last month when the committee asked for new guidance from the council for the upcoming sessions. Councilman McVeigh, I can see you're looking very relaxed today because you don't have to deal with LTAC anymore. Congratulations. And Councilman Fitzpatrick, we welcome you to the Advisory Council. And really my purpose today is to state on behalf of both the Poulsbo Historical Society and the Port of Poulsbo our support for continuing to use LTAC funds in the future to support new community events like the one we were just able to bring to our town here, and include not only our community, but visitors from far and wide. We had visitors from 29 different states and 6 foreign countries that weekend as well. So we believe that that's a good use of the funds as they were intended, and we would hope that the committee will take that into consideration going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and you look much rested and recovered. Thank you for your hard work. Calling for public comment. If you would please come to the podium, state your name, place of residence. The council's glad to hear from you.
Mike Regis, city residence, old-time guy in town. Gary, I want to thank you for your commitment to your community, your steadfastness in presenting your point of view. We need to have that energy in a community, and so you offered up strongly your corner of your responsibilities. And with that, I wish you well. And happy trails, many happy trails for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I'll just note for the record, Mike Regis is a past councilman and knoweth from what he speaketh. So calling for public comment, please come forward. Thank you, David. If you'd state your name and place of residence.
My name's David Hudson, and I just had the wind taken out of my sails by my friend Mike, but I don't mind being a blowhard. Gary's been a friend of mine for a long time, long before he was on council, long before he was involved in the city politics at all. Gary and I go back to when he used to read the newspaper to his mother when she was living her last days. And I want you to know that Gary has been a steadfast friend, a man that I've respected, a man that I trust. I listen to, one of the few people I listen to. He'll vouch for that. And I wanted to thank you, Gary. I want to thank you for the hard work that you put in, for being as open and available as you are, and to warn you that for the last 10 years or so, I've avoided talking politics with you because I didn't want to drag you into the nonsense that is being a councilman, and you have given up that privilege. So with that warning, Gary, thank you. You're a good neighbor, you're a good man, you're a good friend, and I can't wait to get a hold of you. Thank you.
And again, calling for public comment. No way to entice you up here, past Mayor Becky Erickson? Come on. We will require you to state your name and place of residence. We suspect it's Poulsbo.
My name is Becky Erickson. I live in Knoll Road in Poulsbo. I remember meeting Gary at Hot Shots Java many years ago. I don't know how long ago it was, Gary. And talking to him and talking to what I call the grumpy group that used to hang out. Maybe they still do. Love them. I say that with affection. And thinking, this guy is really smart. He's level-headed. He has an immense amount of experience at dealing with complex issues. He's incredibly deliberate in his opinions. He's well-spoken. He's got a beautiful, lovely wife who puts up with him. I thought, you know what? That's pretty much the recipe for a really great city council members. And I said to Gary, I said, you should think about this. You should think about it. And you know what? You far exceeded my expectations. You've done an absolutely magnificent job, Gary. You're the voice of reason, voice of compassion. You see things that many don't see. And as a dear friend of mine used to say, one of the most important features you can have when you're in a position of leadership is to connect dots. You see this over here, and you see this over here, and you see this over here, and you put them together and say, huh, maybe we should think about something. And that's not something you learn, that's something that's innate. And you have that, Gary. So I consider you a good friend. I considered you an absolutely invaluable colleague when I was working here at the city. And most importantly, I want to say thank you. Thank you for all the hard work.
Is there anyone else I can entice up here? So calling for public comment, and I will note for the record, at the end of the workshop format, there'll be a second period of time for public comment from citizens, and we'll be calling for that. So a last shout out for public comment, and not seeing any volunteers, we're going to move on. The next item is a little unusual to appear on a workshop agenda, but time is of the essence, and you'll see there's a consent agenda item. It reads Poulsbo North Kitsap Rotary Foundation for exemption on Poulsbo Municipal Code 12.30.080 intoxicants, Viking Tour Beer Garden, which is an event happening this Saturday. And that is the reason it's appearing unusually on a workshop agenda. So on that note, I am prepared to hear what is the will of the council on that item.
Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve consent agenda item A.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. We'll do this by a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Abstentions, and it passes unanimously. Now we come to the fun part of the evening. The first item on the workshop agenda, and I'm going to read it here, make sure I get this right. Recognition of Council Member McVeigh. So we have a very serious presentation that will then result in cake. But I recall there was a Queen of France who was also provided cake, but we're going to be kinder to you, Gary. Before we get to the serious part, I would urge you all to think for a moment of something you'd like to share about Gary, and I'll lead us off. Number one, I note that staff wisely, in order to get him through his last meeting, have provided him an early supper because, as his wife knows, he has a certain dietary need. And if it's not met in the course of a council meeting, the rest of us hear about it. Gary, could you share the dinner staff provided to you?
I have some beef jerky. I have pistachios, sunflower seeds, and cashews. All keto friendly, by the way. I'm a keto guy.
Who could ask for anything more? So Gary, I'm going to start this off while my colleagues get in the mood. I couldn't believe it. You announced your resignation, and I saw more pictures of you the following week than I'd seen in the previous 8 years. And I'm not sure what the lesson is for any of us in that, but beware, it's a cautionary tale. Number two, I think part of the reason that you're retiring early is to give your very beloved wife, Paula Gritzmacher, who's sitting out there, who has actually won an award, if we had one, for most citizen attendance at a council meeting for a sustained period. She has missed very few meetings. And if that isn't a sign of support and love, I don't know what is. Now, I have a certain sign of love and respect for you too. I'm going to start with, and your wife will recognize this, I don't know how many times I've invited you and your wife to golf with Lori and I, of which maybe once or twice you followed through where your back wasn't a problem. So I have arranged for this special, and it's called a twist assist. So you can be out there in the backyard or talking to David Hudson, your neighbor, and it teaches you how to swing properly so that maybe someday you can start golfing again. So I'm going to present this. It's not a key to the city, but it's a swing to the city. And I hope it works for you.
Thank you so much.
That's number one. What else do I have for you here? You know, Gary, there are certain things I'm going to miss. Number one is you being able to clear your nose into the microphone at a meeting. I don't know how we're going to make up for that, but I've grown to enjoy and find comfort in that. Number two, we're going to make sure that as we approach 9 o'clock hours in the future, that we devote a moment in silence to Gary McVeigh, who would appreciate the tolling of the bells that happens at 9 o'clock in only the way you can, Gary, only the way you can. I'm going to save my rest of my more serious remarks for the podium that I'll call you up to. But let me first turn to my colleagues who might have a thing or two they wish to share. And I'll start with Mr. Tabor.
Oh, yeah.
Not only are we losing a council member to retirement, but we're losing our greatest recruiter. I learned the other day that not only myself and to some extent, other people, Pam and Gary's been a mentor to Michael over here, and it was also my my trainee mentor, person I tagged along with a bit. So yeah, that's a key function that if we can keep serving potentially, recruiting people when the election season rolls around. And yeah, really value your level-headedness, your input, your and your warnings. Those are always valuable as a council member. And it was a really, you helped make it a really easy experience to ramp up, to get acquainted with everything that's going on, and to, I think, be an effective council member, therefore being an effective body of a council. So thank you, Gary.
Yeah, Gary, I was going to say, 6 years of watching from the audience, I always appreciated your service, and 2 years of serving with you. It's been an honor. So you will be missed. I know sometimes we didn't always agree eye to eye on things, but in the end, it was always done with congeniality, professionalism, respect, and it was always appreciated.
I'm going to miss you. We've been through a lot, along with Ed. Lots of ups and downs over these last 6+ years. COVID, just all sorts. And you've been just nothing short of steadfast and a great person to, kind of help me work through learning this role. And I think an example of how to, get a little tougher, but without losing humanity, which was something I was always a little worried about stepping into this. So lots of memories. Thank you. And for a little humorous bit, Gary kind of forced me to out my first pregnancy because he just kept asking my husband and I out for beers, and I just had to keep making, excuses. And then finally I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to tell him why I'm not drinking beer. Anyway, yeah, that was kind of funny. And then it sort of trickled out from there. But yeah, thank you, Gary. And I wish you and Paula all the best. And we should still get together for beer, coffee, or dinner, all that. Thank you.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, otherwise known as Mentee.
Well, Brett, I think we just learned that the excuse you're supposed to make is that your back is out. A lot of people have said a lot of wonderful things. I echo everyone's comments. To say something just a little bit different, I think, Gary, you have modeled what reasonable disagreements between peers should look like. I will never tire of saying this to the public, but the people who are sitting up here do not all agree with each other. And we're not the same person. We're different people with different experiences. And, Gary, you have not been afraid to let us know when you feel strongly about something. And yet, at the end of the day, we all still know that we're coming from a place of concern and compassion for this city. that it's not about us and our egos as individuals. And I think you have walked that balance very well. To include, I think, at our most recent meeting, just last week, in case people missed it, where Gary had a moment, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but it was essentially something like, I don't know what has gotten into my colleagues. They've all lost their minds and I'll help them find it. And that's going to be missed. But thank you for your time, and I expect to see you still at all the holiday parties.
Mr. Newell.
So Gary, I'm torn because I know we're fast approaching 8 o'clock.
Could we wrap this up now, Doug? Can we just wrap this up?
And I normally try to contribute to your getting out by saying just a few words. He said 9. Thank you for your service. We'll see you around. I know you're not leaving the city. I think what makes us strong as a city is that we all participate. We all care about the council, whether we're here at the table, we're out in the audience, we're just walking down and seeing each other along the fjord. So thank you. I know you're not leaving, so I'm not going to say goodbye.
Okay. Councilwoman Crowe.
Being one of your recruitees, I really appreciate your level of patience that you have for me, as well as others who are learning. I'm significantly impressed with your heart and the passion that you have for city and community, and doing it in a way that you serve and not looking for accolade. You serve to meet the needs of the community and not being selfish, but being selfless. And you do it with such integrity and transparency. I really want people to understand that you do it with integrity and transparency, and in echoing what others have said and tethering on to what Michael has shared, that you do disagreement and conflict and giving opportunity for us to learn. I'm going to miss your deep dives that you do in the documents, because from information and questions that you ask, I'm able to, it's like, okay, I'm catch up in the moment. So I really appreciate your thoughtfulness in that, and the time that you spend in that. I don't think folks realize the thickness of the packets and how you bring key moments forward. Sorry. I swallowed. But anyways, yeah, I'm literally getting choked up. But anyways, I actually, I'm looking forward to what is ahead for you, while at the same time looking forward to seeing you show up in spaces. And I will say, to my selfishness, that I might be able to benefit from. So, but no pressure.
Okay.
But anyways, thank you so much for how you serve and how you have modeled servitude to the city, and through the thick and thin of it, the good and bad. So thank you so much, Gary.
Appreciate it. Well said. And now it's time to pivot to a more serious vein. I'll start by, I think it's paraphrasing Shakespeare, who said, "We have not come to bury Gary, but to praise Gary." So if I could ask his wife, Paula, to please come forward and join Councilmember McVeigh and I at the podium, we would be honored. So on a personal note, and we're going to have to lean in to be heard.
Okay.
On a personal note, I first met Gary long before Planning Commission and City Council. The first time he was here from Minnesota as a member of the Rotary Club, before he pulled his parachute and went back to Minnesota, only to be driven back here by mosquitoes, or so I suspect. The second time I got to know Gary, not having to do with the planning commission or the city council, was when we'd run across each other in the hallways of Martha and Mary, where we had parents in various stages of the aging process. And then later, of course, to be joined by Gary McVeigh up here, which has been a great privilege and an honor. And he has given a great deal to this community with earnestness and with hard work and with deliberate thought and careful consideration before each and every vote. And that may not be a rare quality, but it is an important quality. And so it is my great privilege tonight to represent this city council and represent past Mayor Becky Erickson and myself in presenting this plaque on behalf of not only the council, but the staff that you have endeavored to work with, keep busy, and like myself, bother, all for a good cause, Gary. So I'm going to read from this plaque now. And this reads, and Paul, if you would come in and take a look.
Yep.
City of Poulsbo, Viking City, Gary McVeigh, Planning Commission, 2017 to 2020. City Council Member, 2020 to 2026. For your dedicated service and commitment. Thank you for everything you have done. You truly made the difference. And I thank you, Counselor.
Thanks.
Thank you on behalf of the City of Poulsbo.
Thank you very much.
And Paula?
Let's get out to it.
No, a few words, sir.
I'm going to make a few words, but I thought they could get a picture out here to see.
The marketing guy.
This is how we handle the parking situation. He directed me back.
Okay. Oh, would you hold on to that?
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. I appreciate it very much. Yeah, almost 10 years of service to the city between Planning Commission and City Council. It was Mayor Erickson, when I was serving on Planning Commission, who called me, and she had planted a seed or two earlier about possibly running for City Council. And she said, "Are you ready to run for City Council?" And I think my first question was, can I still go to California for a month or two in the wintertime? That was my first question. Anyway, so that's kind of what started it. When I joined Planning Commission, I never had any intention I didn't really have this idea of progressing upward in city government by any means, but at that time, the City Council was making a few decisions that ignored the Planning Commission's advice, and I had thought to myself, do I want to continue providing advice to the city, or do I want to be involved in making the decisions? And I pretty quickly decided I want to be involved in making the decisions. So thank you to all of my colleagues. It's been a pleasure serving with you. Thank you to Mayor Stern, to Mayor Erickson. I want to give a shout out to some of my past city council members I've served with. Jeff McGinty was a real mentor to me. And I also served with, had the pleasure of serving with Connie Lord, Gary Neistel, David Musgrove, Ken Thomas, some really terrific people that in many ways took me under their wing and helped teach me the role. So I appreciate that very much. You know, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve. What I've enjoyed most, I think, is being involved in charting the future for the city. That is really a unique role that we have as city council members, is that we really need to, and it's imperative that we look beyond the next quarter or the next year and think about 10 or 20 or 30 years into the future. And sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes that will ruffle some feathers. But if we don't take the long-term view of the city, I'm not sure who will. So that's always been very important to me. I had a list of some of the things I'm most proud of here. I'm not going to go through that in the interest of time. I want you to know, okay? If you're curious, friend me on Facebook. I had a little post there when I first announced I was stepping down with some of the things I'm most proud of. But we've gotten a lot done in the 6.5 years I've been on council. As Britt mentioned, we came through COVID largely thanks to Mayor Erickson's leadership. We survived COVID and we came out, I think, stronger than ever. I do think, one of the things that as a planning commissioner and city council member, I am most proud of is we have, I believe, successfully managed to grow in a smart way. We've accommodated significant growth, but we've managed to maintain Poulsbo's special, unique charm and culture and its Norwegian heritage. And the coming together of those things, managing significant growth and holding on to what makes us special, as all of you know, and our planning staff knows, is not an easy task. And so I feel really good about the state of the city. I've mentioned to a couple of colleagues that besides me turning 70 next month, besides me losing some good friends, my mortality clock ticking a little louder than usual, and Paula and I wanting to still do some things while we still can. The other part of why I decided to step down now is I truly feel that the city is in very good hands. We have great leadership. Our budget and our finances are stable, which a lot of municipalities in Kitsap County, I'm afraid, cannot say right now. It's a good time. I think as good a time as you can do something like this. And we're not doing any other searches right now that I'm aware of for other council members or department heads at the moment. So everything is pretty stable. I do want to just note that one of the big changes that we've accommodated in recent years, and I've been part of with my council colleagues, was changing the structure of government, going from a full-time mayor to a part-time mayor and a full-time city administrator. And Rob Gelder has been the perfect choice for our first city administrator. I have enjoyed working with Rob. We go back to Rob's Martha and Mary days. We go back a long time. So it's been a pleasure working with Rob, and that was one of the reasons I ran for re-election last fall. Was I wanted to help with the transition to the new style of government, to the new form of government. I wanted to help Rob and Mayor Stern get off to a good start. And after 3 years of effort, I wanted to make sure that we completed the downtown parking program decision. I'm looking forward to the future. We've already planned a trip to Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii before, believe it or not. So really looking forward to that. We're going there next winter. I want to say a special thank you to my wife, Paula. I'm going to get emotional here. She has either attended in person or watched on VCAT every city council meeting I've been in. 235 meetings. 235 meetings. That doesn't include, yeah, thank you. And that doesn't include our annual retreats or special meetings. That's just like the basic average meeting, if you will, the 3 times a month. I could not have asked for a better partner, more support. We go home, I go home to her every night after she's watched on TV oftentimes, and we'll talk about issues. We talk about all of you. No, not really. Anyway, so thank you. Thank you, Pauline. I appreciate that very much. A couple of things we didn't get to that I implore my colleagues to continue working on. And that is getting the old Albertsons grocery store space filled in Poulsbo Village. That space has been empty almost 10 years now. Mayor Erickson knows how she proposed many different new ideas to the Albertsons corporate leadership. We've tried many different ways to try to get something in that space. We have not been successful working with the shopping center management to get that done. So please, let's keep working on that. And the other item, 6.5 years, I've been encouraging this council to approve a position for a public information officer / communications coordinator. I think it's high time a city of our size and a city of our complexity has a dedicated professional to communicating with the public. It's high time. So please, please don't forget that one. Okay. So anyway, I'm probably forgetting some people, forgetting some things, but I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I like to hope I've made a difference, and thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.
Please join me in a round of applause for Councilman Gary McVeigh.
Thanks.
I'm going to call for a 10-minute recess, and we're going to go to the far wall, and I think we're going to have cake, and it's a chance for each of you to greet Gary, and we will commence again approximately at 5:45. Thank you. On the Poulsbo and the Poulsbo City Council Workshop of June 10, 2026 is back in order. We have an additional 3 items on the workshop agenda. The first now will be Poulsbo Water Supply Update and Discussion, led by our Public Works Director, Diane Linius and Charlie Roberts, and assisted. Then we're going to move on to Public Works Maintenance Facility Update, also Diane Linius, and then questions and concerns of the council and continued public comment. So on that note, I guess, Charlie, would you lead us into the water supply update?
I'll just introduce our team here. I'd like to just remind council that in our water system plan that Charlie completed last year, one of the high priorities was maximizing our water rights and maximizing all of our wells. We had the opportunity to work with GOC and Syntec and Andrew Ostring on Lincoln Well number 2 and also get started on our water rights. Tonight is about bringing council up to speed on some of that work and giving you an idea of some of the work that we will need to do looking ahead to continue that mission. We're off to a good start and working with Andrew and his teammate Matt has been very successful. So I'll turn it over to Charlie and Andrew.
Yeah, we just want to give, excuse me, a little update on Lincoln Well 2. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that the well was back in service and that we'd bring forward a little bit more information about the process we went through and provide some additional information. And Andrew with Geosyntec is the expert on this. He's a hydrogeologist and he's got to put together a good presentation here. I'll let him run through it and ask any questions. Happy to chat about whatever comes up. So
Thank you, Charlie. And if you would guide us through.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, and for the introduction. It's a workshop, so yes, there's slides, but hopefully everybody assumes that stop me anytime, and we'll dive into just about anything that's on your minds, wells, water rights, and specific to Lincoln 2. Hydrogeologist, I've been working on the Kitsap Peninsula for the last 15 years, working on water supply wells, and then on the east side of the state for that. So things we'll go over today, just talk a little bit about the overview of well life cycles, right? We drill them in the ground, we hope for the best sometimes, and then we give them attention when we feel like they need it, but talk a little bit about what that looks like on a more holistic perspective. Specifically talk about some of the maintenance efforts and what that can translate into for time and costs and just planning efforts. Jump on Lincoln 2 as a case study for that. There was certainly some urgency, and Diane and the team met the mark on that last year to get the well up and running. So we thought we would dig into that a bit more and then really translate that into what it may mean for council with short, mid, and long-term planning. These are photos of what you pull out. These are actually working wells, and I'll show a few more of these snapshots as well. This is actually one from over on the east side of the state, just what happens in a potable municipal supply well. Even when we meet all the water quality parameters with the aging process, things start to corrode and degrade, and that can translate into trouble. And we don't always see it coming until it falls off the cliff. Thankfully, the city's been tracking this pretty closely. I was listening, Charlie, in case you wanted to jump in there or anything. So yeah, just some life cycle considerations. Just like anything else, there's always a time for retirement. I think that was obviously the hottest topic of the day, and I was humbled to be part of that conversation. So, or at least
You're not suggesting the councilman wore out.
I am absolutely not. He's planning appropriately, which is, I think, the topic of of the evening. It sounds like, but the same is true for wells. Drilling them, designing replacements, constructing, operating, maintain. And then the last 3 points really are the ones to drive home here in some of the planning discussions are the rehabilitation and then planning for the ultimate retirement of those wells. And really the data that Charlie and the team have been planning for and collecting and how that feeds into this process ultimately to determine where we are in the cycle. And a lot of this comes down to kind of like this graphic, although I know it can be a little bit of maybe a 90-degree head turn, but a cost benefit analysis when we start looking at what happens as wells start to go through a natural aging process. And Diane or Charlie, I can't remember who had said this was kind of a typical even concrete lifespan profile. You can think of it that way. So on the vertical axis, there's 2 different sides here, but just think about higher up means higher well production. And without well, do I have a pointer on here? Yeah. Does that show up? Yeah. Just kind of so vertical axis, this is well production rate, how much you get out of a well when you first turn it on. So of course it's high, better be when we start on the left side. And then it's going to go through a natural aging process, and there's this kind of continuous decay. Think of it that way within the well. Of course, that rate of decay depends on a lot of things. But what we aim to do with the rehabilitation and planning efforts is to bring us back up on a regular cadence so that we can stay off of this low performance line. So the short takeaway is the red line is with active management, the blue line is without active management, and at some point we're going to hit that threshold for replacement. And as you start going down on that curve, costs just go up in general, especially true over on the east side of the state. And Diane had asked this question, well, do deeper wells mean just higher cost of operation, a higher cost of construction and rehabilitation? Short answer is yes. There's a lot that comes into play with that, but things just get more expensive the farther down on the curve you go. And so then it really becomes a question of, do we replace or do we put an increment of investment into maintaining those wells? But ultimately, at some point, retirement is going to be necessary. So the biggest thing is just to know when that's upon you and to be able to plan for it rather than being caught by surprise. I'll try and dance through this relatively quickly, but see if it prompts some conversations. There are really three primary things that result in poor yield from a well. And by looking at the data, both water levels within the well, outside of the well, and then comparing that to pumping levels, we can figure out a lot. The three primary causes are either the well is clogged, it's getting decrepit like one of those earlier shots. And so think about it this way, if there's a static water level in a well, that would just extend out to here. When we first turn the pump on, our pumping level's here. If we have a clogging issue, the static water level isn't going to change, but you're going to be pumping from a lower level. The well's just, your straw is getting plugged up. Pump conditions, another, right? Pumps age just like the well does as well. So now we think about where we were pumping in year one. We might have a higher pumping level moving into the future because, or in, as the well ages, or the pump ages rather, because pumps just wear, sanding. And then the last one is the one that none of us really like to hear, aquifer declines, right? Are we having this bigger picture problem resulting from a whole bunch of new straws tapping the system, changing precipitation, all of those things. And that's a shift from just the static water level. It's not because we're sucking harder on the well, it's just because the water levels are drawing down lower. So we go into and say, well, which one of these three or what combination of these three are really affecting us? And that was the primary question that Charlie and Diane wanted to get to is, are we worried about declining water levels in our aquifer? Is it because we're approaching the cliff or the wall or whatever it is? And so that was one of the key things we looked at. We don't have it on this topic, but I'll save the anticipation here. Really in the, since Lincoln Well 2 had been constructed and really Lincoln Well 1, maybe a couple feet of change in static water levels, but that wasn't the driver for the big declines in well production. So, good news in that regard that we didn't see big changes in static water levels that would say, oh my gosh, we're falling off a cliff. Won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but this is just the reality of what this data looks like and how the team looks at it. There's that static water level, and here's what happens. This is a pumping level in a well. It declines, we rehab it, it comes back up, but there's a lot of other things that happen, right? Another well turns on, you turn on Pew Well, or you turn on Lincoln Well 1, and now you've got this drop in static water levels by a few feet. So it's not always such an easy answer just to say, what's the water level in the well? Charlie and the team monitor those all the time, but they've got to have the context for us to understand what that means. This is Charlie just was talking about the water system plan update, and maybe let's circle up on some water rights and really just highlight what's in the water system plan and some of the keynotes. Just the takeaway, water system plan here shown the capacity, source capacity. These are almost nameplates, not quite, but this is just what the report out is on the well pump capacity, which can vary by season and it can vary by a number of other things. But water system plan, here's how we report out of what's available. And then there's the water right authority that's tied to each of those, both an instantaneous, a rate, and how much you can take out throughout the entire year. And we'll talk about a couple of these circles here, but just a few notes. What's really important on that water system plan as you look at the 20-year horizon, what is it assumed? And what are some of the big conclusions? You're going to be pumping more as you continue to grow. You're just going to be pumping longer to keep up with the demand. You've got storage, but instead of pumping 18 hours, you're pumping 20 hours as an example. So just more stress on that aquifer system and on the wells. These last things are just.
Yeah, just could, if you could cover for those of us that weren't around then, why those two wells are inactive now?
Yeah, so they're actually, excuse me, they're actually surface water rights, not wells. So the city of Poulsbo was originally fed by surface springs. So way back when the city was founded, the college granted us water rights to surface water. And since then, we've inactivated those and drilled wells and used that kind of right across our different portfolio of wells. And part of the long range water strategy that we're engaging Geosyntec with is consolidating and I don't know what the right terminology is, but kind of adjusting and making our actual wells our primary right as a potential option. Kind of getting the benefit.
So they're not like a inactive, something that could be turned on later. They're something we want to take off the books and move those rights to a actual active source.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to bring surface water into our water system currently. So.
And the reason they're always shown here is to demonstrate that intent. These rights are in good standing, and because they've always been in the water system plan, you can say back to ecology, we've always planned for those, even though we haven't touched those sources in decades or whatever they are. It's in the water system plan, so they're shown there. And we do have a couple notes on what some water rights strategies may be for the city on a couple upcoming slides. But yeah, if anything jumps out on this with regards to water rights, happy to talk about it. There's kind of additive and non-additive water rights. Those oldest surface water rights are the original kind of certificate. And then these non-additive ones, they all kind of point back to those and say, we're still counting those and we're not adding the overall volume. But maybe just a couple of important points that are in the water system plan. And as we're looking at, do we have enough capacity in the future? What does it assume? Well, first, the water system plans assumes you're always going to have 650 GPM, right? When we're talking 20, I'm using this example as the Pew and the Lincoln wells, they share a water right. So we're saying we've got 2,295 GPM of source capacity now. And the water system plan assumes that for the city to continue to meet that demand physically, you're going to have that 20 years in the future. So that's really germane to what we were just talking about is life cycle. Things go downward. They have a downward trend. And so to make sure that consistent with the plan and its assumption that source capacity is going to stay the same, we need to be, providing that maintenance and making sure to keep up on our dental work here, so to speak, on the wells. And it also just overall, it anticipates growth. No surprise here. Council's well aware of that. And in order to meet that growth, essentially tapping out your water rights, right? Maximizing them and being able to align them with those sources. Because if you think of this last row, here's the capacity, 2,300 GPM of active wells, and there's some caveats to there that Charlie and Diane could talk about, I'm sure in great detail. And you've got more water right authority, right? You've got 3,100 GPM of water right authority, but you can only, best case scenario right now, pull 2,300 GPM. So you don't have the capacity to pull out what you're authorized to do. And the water system plan assumes you're going to be doing that, maximizing that, new sources and maintaining the existing ones. So it's important to live up to that, I guess, to meet those 20-year projections is the point. So let's talk about Lincoln 2 and just where things were at. On this vertical axis, just think about this as well performance. How much flow do you get out of the well for at the pumping water level? It was dropping. So this is the data that Charlie and the team have been collecting over the last 8 years. We took a look at this when Dan and folks were asking us, saying, well, is this an aquifer problem? Is this because the well is just running dry or neighbors are pumping or what is it? And so we looked at those 3 cases that we talked about earlier, and it turns out it's the first one, that the well is just not appropriately sucking all the water out. It's losing its performance. Essentially, that's what this plot shows. And again, kind of news first, the star should actually slide a bit to the right, but we brought it back up to here. So if you think about where that curve was, you drop it down, you bring it back up, you drop it down, you bring it back up. We restored about 18% of the capacity of that well, or the performance of that well. And then we also did a couple other notes that I'll make here. But the important thing is it's not linear. It's not always linear, right? You this is the sort of the trend you can draw on, is that it might not always mean it's going to decay consistently some percentage each year. It might start dropping off. So a really important thing to be mindful of, especially, the scenario that the city found itself in with Lincoln 2 last year. And really found that immediate action was needed. I mean, you were hitting 550 gallons a minute. The well was triggering low-level alarms. We were talking moratoriums, is my understanding, and things were really needed to be addressed quickly. So this is what we saw. This is actually just a couple notes. The well could produce 730 gallons a minute with not a lot of drawdown when it was first installed, coming up on 20 years ago. Last fall, it had dropped about 30% of that capacity and performance, and it couldn't sustain that for very long at all. And you run a camera down the well. We pulled the pump out. This is a screenshot, one of many screenshots and videos. And it was like, that's a pretty shiny screen for 300 feet below ground. This is just slots. That's what you're looking at. And if you look in the back, everything is black, and you see these iron nodules. Council might not be, this might not be news that there are some iron and manganese in some of the waters, particularly Lincoln 1 and Pew well. That's what was happening at Lincoln 2. This looks great, but this is iron and iron oxides and iron oxyhydroxides. It's black. It should be like rocks. You should see sand and gravel through there. You didn't. So even though the screen looked good, nothing broken, nothing deteriorating, you've got basically iron, this rust, cropping up behind the well screen. Scrub it. And so we developed this rehab plan. This is where we put together a rehabilitation plan. Put it out to bid, found our preferred contractor. Council awarded that work. Brushed it, scrubbed it. I made the dental reference earlier. You've got to do exactly that. And then acid treatment. This is like food grade acid to essentially dissolve all those irons. And then impulse generation, which is pretty cool stuff. There's a bunch of sand pack behind that well screen. You've got to push energy out into the formation. So this is why, I've encountered other utility districts and cities where they say, you know what, we put some stuff in the well. It didn't work out at all. It's all about having a tailored program. This is not meant to be a marketing or an advertisement here unnecessarily, but it really is meant to be a deliberate approach that you have to develop as you are implementing these sorts of programs to get the return on investment. And that's what we did. Long story short, these are just the different curves, and we were able to also, in addition to identifying these fouling mechanisms in the well, we found that the well and the pump was not sitting where it could sit. It was actually 15 feet higher than it needed to be. So not just the performance piece, but also getting the records squared away and understanding what our capacity was. So now the short takeaway from this is that you can pump more water than you're even authorized to pump out of Lincoln 2. That's the short takeaway. It's 650 gallons a minute is what the water rate is. You can pull more than that out now. So what are the next steps? It's really to now take, what we just talked about, the maintenance, the life cycles, the rights, and align that with other wells and with a water rights strategy that is matched up to wells. And we'll talk about one or two of those water rights strategies here really briefly, or however, in whatever level of detail council would like to. Step one, in the near term, maintain and optimize Lincoln Well 1. The same, it's pumping under its water right authority. There's some combined water rights there, but it's pumping less, much less than it was. So doing I wouldn't quite call it a rinse and repeat, but making those same improvements to Lincoln 1 and then Big Valley wells. Increase some redundancy. We're just talking about the VFDs that are planned for the other wells and generators and boosters, and then the intertie with KPUD. That'll be a big boon for the city. And then, of course, conservation, right? Not just increasing capacity, but decreasing demand. Councilman, you were asking a bit about water rights. So just in short, these are all surface water or shallow certificates they say additive. So these are like the primary water rights that the city has priorities from the 40s through the 60s. And then all the subsequent rights basically just said, when ecology made those decisions, well, you don't need any more water because the planning window at the time wasn't predicated on the growth that the city has seen. You don't need any more water. And so they gave you essentially what you needed at the time. And as Charlie was saying, you basically pointed to, you switched from surface water to groundwater. Well, when ecology made those decisions, I'm gonna make sure I don't dig into this on another slide here, just to give you a sense. 3 to go, folks. Ecology made them on a 1-for-1 decision. They said, all right, you're going from surface water to groundwater. Every gallon a minute surface water, we're going to give you like 1-for-1 in groundwater. That was a decision they made because the city didn't need water at the time. Revisiting that is really important because it's all about what your impacts are on surface waters. That's how the decisions are made in WIRA 15, where the city sits. It's a closed basin, and essentially the impact that happens from going surface to ground is very different. And so ecology, there's a good opportunity to revisit that 1-to-1 transfer for ecology and essentially, broaden the water right authority that the city has for groundwater. So water rights, and then where should new wells go? Co-location, trying to establish them in the areas that have the lowest capital requirement, putting them adjacent to other city wells or on city well sites. There's another deeper aquifer. These wells tap what's called the Poulsbo aquifer. It's it's kind of like, think about it as a lens, a big ball of sand and gravel below ground. There are other deeper systems tapped by others, Bainbridge, Capud, we know are out there. They're deeper, they can be very productive, and they have, again, that benefit of some water rights triggers that we would look to kind of renegotiating with ecology. And you could put them on the same well site because they'd be deeper. So in the near term, really looking at what's the performance of the city with wells now, and not jumping to, well, let's drill a new well. That should be out there. That's part of the conversation, part of the lexicon. But what's happening? What are the performance constraints now? And really going after that lowest hanging fruit and prioritizing those that can provide the biggest bang for the city's buck.
Can I stop you there, Matt?
Yes, sir.
Is there an accurate way, looking into the future, to estimate how much longer some of our current wells will last? I'm assuming we've done that. I didn't really see a whole lot in the package about that. Can you just talk with us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's I'll harken back to a couple things. Maybe I'll give you the 2-slide answer. It's one of these 3 things that are really driving the remaining lifespan of the well. I'll say, just to kind of take the pump condition and well clogging, that's going to happen on a, I wouldn't say predictable cadence, but you can kind of forecast out what that looks like. And then there's the aquifer level decline. We didn't identify any big scare points on the aquifer piece. So it's not like you're losing 2 feet of water per 5 years or something like that. And so we'd forecast that out. As far as the wells go, this is what we're talking about, putting together as part of the next phase. This is for Lincoln 2. We do have a sense of what this kind of decay rate is going to look like because we can look back in time 7 years. So really one of the next outcomes for us is to kind of snap this line back up to the most recent rehab. Now we know what that decay looked like for Lincoln 2 in this example, and we can kind of forecast out when you should do it next. A typical rule of thumb is, every 10 years you should be thinking about rehabilitating wells. Or if the performance has declined by more than 20%, you enter into that territory if you're not going to get it back, because that iron is so heavy that you can throw as much acid as you want at it, you won't get it back. So it's a 2-parter. When you see a performance trigger of 10+%, 10 to 20%, time to go in and rehab. And now we have a good sense of what you restore. So yeah, council member, I guess point being, we'll provide a couple of these kind of life cycle forecasts coming up. But really think about every 10 years as being a regular rehabilitation cadence for wells. Mayor?
So to follow up on Gary's remark, everything in the report deals with our physical assets right now, the condition, the storage, the supply and demand. But we do have an interlocal agreement with the Kitsap Public Utility District, which is a water provider. Did you do a cost benefit analysis moving forward of purchase of water versus developing, maintaining, or exploiting our water.
I'll let Diane comment on that, I think.
We haven't done a cost benefit analysis, but we do see the need for both. Because one of the things that is really important is redundancy and management of peak events, which are very different than average daily events. Water from Cape Hud, we pay for that. We also pay for our own water, so we need to have both. But that's a good question.
If you go to the optimize and maintain well slide. So we were talking about Lincoln 2, which we just did, but can you answer like when do we do this when we've done this, or have we done this on the rest of these wells? Or have we not needed to rehab the rest of these, or just where we stand on them?
I'd say in the past we have done some elements of rehab periodically, but not to the same level as we did Lincoln 2. I think most of our previous rehab has just been mechanical, which is the brushing and bailing, and not so much the impulse generation or the acid treatment. And I think this is the only one that I've been at the city for rehab work for. So I can't speak to how much pre-work was done versus just having the well pulled and having the mechanical brushing. But this one, we took water quality samples. They had it analyzed and came up with some likely causes before we even pulled the well out of the ground, so that we had kind of a program in place.
Okay, so the plan you just talked about, is that going to be for all the wells then, or just Lincoln 2?
That's the subject of the next step. This is, and I don't want to overspeak for Diane and Charlie, but yeah, we do have a proposal that we're putting together to essentially look at the city's wells in exactly the regard you're talking about, is what's the most bang for our buck? Where do we feel like there've been these same declines? And then what's the recommended next step?
Yeah, just as an example, if you look at Lincoln number 1, that well was originally drilled in the late 60s, and it's been out of the ground a few times, but not a lot. Our current pump capacity is 325, but our right is 475. And so there's a lot of room to be gained there. And it could be likely a pump replacement, maybe a bigger pump, but also some, the screening. It's in the same aquifer that Lincoln 2 is. And so we could expect the same, kind of characteristics. And so we'd expect a similar treatment when we go to do that one. But the goal would be to maximize our right at Lincoln 1 to provide that additional capacity that we're not seeing today, we're not getting advantage of.
I think, yep.
So that same capacity screen, it looks like Pew Road has the most potential capacity that's missing. Is that also going to be, is that on, I assume, on the list of wells to look at?
Yeah, so Pew and Lincoln 2 share the same right. The Pew well has iron bacteria in it, and that's something that can contaminate the system. And so we maintain it as a backup. But the way our right works for Pew well is that Lincoln 2 or Pew can run at the same time, but not both.
Got it. And then you mentioned, or I don't want to jump ahead, I'll let you continue.
No, we're talking wells. We're going to talk briefly conservation, but this is the meat of it. So please, yeah.
I do have a question about conservation, so I'll save that. Is there a capacity for the Cape Hud intertie, or is there, and then what are the triggers to initiate the Cape Hud intertie? Is that just like those peak events that were mentioned?
Right now we have an ILA with them for emergency water usage or kind of pre-anticipated maintenance needs. It isn't tied to a specific gallons per minute. And like when we did the West Side Well project a few years ago, we used KPUD water for about 3 months. And the way the intertie is set up with them is that if the Poulsbo tank, which is tied to that system, drops a certain level and doesn't recover, it starts feeding through that intertie just based on pressure differential in the system. So it's not something we have to go out and tweak or adjust. It just happens. So in the event of an emergency that draws our tank down, we would start seeing that emergency water being supplemented to our system. But I'd also say part of our future discussion with KPUD will be nailing down a number to utilize on more of a peak event or day-to-day basis, not just an emergency. So.
I guess maybe in summary, Cape Hud aside, it is largely a physical well constraint that's limiting the city right now within its, you bump up against the 20-year planning horizon, its first wells, and then it starts moving into water rights, Cape Hud aside. So and that's all predicated on no declines in production. So that gap widens as you start to see those wells age over or continue to age over the next 10 to 20 years. So planning for that decline and the redundancy needs is critical, to be honest. Yeah. Not a whole lot left on the throttle on some of these. And so, definitely something to focus on sooner than later would be the recommendation.
One of the things that Charlie and I have talked about quite a bit is doing some exploratory drilling for an additional source for the city long term.
Perfect. Yeah, that feeds into my next question is, do we have when like 20 years, 50 years, when we'd start to have to drill new wells, when these would get to the point where no amount of rehabilitation would, doesn't make sense in terms of ROI versus drilling an entirely new well?
It will. And that's part of the long range strategy that we're working on with Geosyntech, because it takes time to get it right, drill well, to find a site. I'd say within the 20-year planning horizon is kind of the time frame we're looking at. So we're starting that now, knowing that it takes a while.
As it's both water rights driven and then well siting driven, I would say that there are some water right, unless we're just going to do a 1-for-1, put a new one exactly where Lincoln 2 is, there's water right changes that have to happen either to go deeper or to put wells in new areas. There are changes. And thankfully, the city has some opportunities here to go back to the table with ecology on its water rights situation. But there are, these things take a lot of time, just both on the well construction and the water rights side.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask, you had said about that conversation exploratory, is that keeping it at the Poulsbo aquifer level, or are you also considering to go deeper, as you mentioned, in those exploratory? And then if we're looking at new well sites, are we also going to then have to be considering property acquisition, assuming that we don't have city property necessarily put aside in all the right places, the right conditions, et cetera, for new wells?
Yeah, you're thinking ahead about a number of things that we've been talking about. A lot of jurisdictions are going deeper. KPUD's wells out at Seebeck are very deep. Port Orchard recently drilled a very deep well. We would rely on our hydrogeologists to help us determine what's the wisest choice for Poulsbo in our location.
And maybe I'll speak to that, not to be too presumptive that I'd be the hydrogeologist, but to say that it is all about bookending the risk. And what do we know about putting in a new well in the Poulsbo aquifer at another site that the city could easily attain? Where is it relative to its existing infrastructure, so that we're not talking about, massive new pipeline projects to go in that sweet spot? And then likewise, what would be the cost to drill deeper? Because the nice part about, if I were to drill another deeper well at Lincoln 2, I could keep both of these, because a deep well isn't going to have much effect on the shallow well. They're separated by 200 feet of clay. So if you're pumping out of the deep one, you get to put them right next to each other, essentially. So there's a lot of benefit to that. So those are the conversations we're having now, is should we talk about a deeper well on this site because we own it, because the pipes are there? Or should we be looking at other shallower sites because it's cheaper to drill a well, and maybe there's more certainty there that we can talk about. So we're going to put these kind of projections together about what are the impacts on other city wells if we're to drill another shallow one here, and kind of putting together that matrix for the city as a next phase. It's part of the intention. Conservation, very important. Charlie presented these, I expect, in quite a bit of detail, but there's the 2029 plan to have that in place and have some significant, reductions in water usage, both the 5% and then the 10% benchmarks. And Charlie, you could articulate that certainly much better than I. Happy to do it. But these are not trivial volumes, especially during the summer season irrigation. If we're talking about reducing even, 5-10% of irrigation demand, that's huge. Translates to the same kind of benefit we just talked about at Lincoln 2, which is 100 GPM during peak summer months. If we're talking about improved irrigation practices, you really start to see how these numbers are meaningful, especially with the effort we just completed at Lincoln 2. So it's not just a drop in the bucket.
And it's yeah,
Unintended.
lot cheaper for everyone not to water as much versus drill a new well to water just as much. So
Charlie or Diane, what policy considerations will the council, if any, be considering in order to implement a conservation program versus what's in your administrative authority?
we'll be bringing some code changes forward related to conservation. They're still in process, but it will delegate some authority to the Public Works Director to kind of anticipate, the way I envision it is kind of anticipate upcoming need for conservation and request voluntary, and then based on the need and what it's looking like, it might be a council declaration that kind of moves it to the next step that has more extreme measures. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's still in the works.
Any other questions from council?
I just want to comment, Charlie, after your previous presentation about conservation, I'll have you know that I went home and changed the start time of my home sprinkler system from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Okay.
Love to
And
hear
I
it.
just think, little changes like that, I think if people were aware of the issue, would be happy to make that change. And so, back to my point about communication previously, if we can, engage the public, communicate with the public about a couple of simple changes like that, I think it could make a huge difference. Took me 2 minutes to make that change,
All right, Doug Tabor.
Two things. One, for Charlie and Diane, kind of with this overlay and with ideally the public education reduction, that not being met, at what point would we need to do like municipal policy, codes that would help, get reduction. If we need reduction, incentivize. Thank you. And then the second point I was going to make, and that's more of just informing the council and giving us recommendations and ideas about that when those two pass with aquifer levels cross. And then the other thing I wanted to note for everyone, that Poa pratensis is an invasive species in all of North America, and that's Kentucky bluegrass. So maybe we can ban people planting front yards filled with this invasive species, and I want to rip it all out on my own yard, except for obviously sports fields and parks. That's it. Yeah, fun fact, I didn't know it was an invasive species in all of North America.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that after the last presentation, one thing I noticed, and I won't say where, but driving down in the rain and seeing sprinklers going off.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, is there a technological fix that could be encouraged and implemented that, despite timers, if it's raining, that the sprinklers do not activate?
There are, yeah. I don't know. I won't profess to be super knowledgeable about sprinkler systems, but I know at Nordic Cottages, one of the things that we installed was a rain gauge to, and you can adjust all of it so that if it doesn't rain for, 72 hours and the temperature is above 65 degrees, it kicks on, and, if it doesn't meet these conditions, it stays off.
Well, this was actively raining and actively watering at the same time. So I was thinking of your presentation as I drove past that, and thought,
Awesome.
that, we could probably, there's gotta be a technology way to make that not happen. So, okay, we need to share that or implement it.
Thank you for the very educational presentation. I learned a lot. And Charlie, if you want to send me a picture of the after rehabilitation screen, I'd love to see the comparison.
It's in a report. Yep.
So thank you, Andrew, Diane, Charlie. I know we were all holding our collective breath last year about Lincoln Well 2, and this is a big relief for us, but it did kick us into gear, which we probably would have done anyway on the bigger picture. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Council.
Thanks.
And we're going to move right along into the third workshop agenda item, Public Works Maintenance Facility Update. And Diane will guide us.
We go far, Brooks.
I don't go up to the top there. Yeah. Awesome. So tonight, we're going to give you a quick update on the Public Works Maintenance Facility. As you know, we've been working hard with Helix Design Group to bring costs down on a project so that it's a right-sized and reasonable investment. There we go. So in 2024, Helix completed the schematic design and cost estimate for our new public works facilities, which includes a shop and utility bays, vehicle storage buildings, totaling at the completion of their design about 33,000 square foot of new covered space for our public works operations. For anyone who is listening, Public Works shop and maintenance facility and the storage of all of our equipment and vehicles occurs over at the Quonset hut across from the library. And if you've ever had the opportunity to go into that space, it has served its useful life. Probably about 40 years ago, it reached its useful life. That area for our mechanic and our storage is currently under 10,000 square feet. So Helix Design Group laid out 3 buildings for us. Building 1 is a shop and work bays. Building 2 is enclosed vehicle storage, and building 3 is open vehicle storage. That adds up to about 30,000 square feet. They did a cost estimate and it came in, I believe, at $24 million. And we had them update that cost to 2026 numbers. And of course, it's $25.5 million now. And when we had them do that design, we asked them to maximize the site. So when you look at the picture in front of you, you'll see that the building B2 is pushed all the way up to the top of the property edge. Building B3 is all the way down close to Viking Way. And in order to make those buildings work, there's retaining walls on the site. The nature of the site work is a little bit more expensive with retaining walls, but it totally maximizes the site. And as I mentioned, the original cost estimate was about $24.5 million or 24.3. When they updated those costs to 2026 numbers, it was $25.5 million. When we updated our utility rates planning for this infrastructure improvement, we planned on each utility spending about $5 million. When we had solid waste, we had 4 utilities, enterprise funds. So there was our first 20 million. And then the general fund, which is streets and parks and facilities, paid the other 5 million, and that 25 million sounded about right. We are planning to outsource solid waste. We also felt like it was a very big investment. So we personally set a target of bringing the number down to 20 million. So the first and easiest way to do that is chop up your buildings. So we took a stab at it and we had to take 6 bays off of building B1, which is our shop. And we had to eliminate the uncovered storage based on the original prices that we had. When we looked at that in terms of square footage, it took us down to about 19,000 square feet of covered space. And that's not including the additional mezzanine that can be added later. But that was too deep of a cut for us to be able to house our equipment. We just honestly couldn't go that far. And it did get us the $5.5 million reduction. There's other reductions inside the building, but I'm just giving you the big picture. But we didn't like that option. It didn't seem appropriate. So we took a second look at it, and Charlie got his red pencil and his computer out and started crunching, and Mike started crunching, and we even had our deputy building official take a look at it from the building perspective. And in working with our architect, we came up with a different idea, which was to take a little piece off of each building, still have the 3 buildings, and to make site grading modifications that eliminated retaining walls, and to shift buildings a little bit to minimize concrete, retaining walls, and pavement. And we think we came up with something that works. So what you see is Viking Avenue on the right. Again, we have the same 3 buildings that we had before. They're a little bit smaller. Our total square footage is 28,000 covered roof space for these 3 buildings. So we reduced it by 17% from the original design from the contractor, and we also, or from the architect, and we reduced it by approximately 5 million. So we feel like we're in the zone that as we finished our value engineering over the next month, we'll be able to bring back a formal recommendation to council on what we want to move ahead and build, and get a new scope and budget from our architect to design it, with a goal of completing the design this year, advertising in early 27, and starting construction in 27. That's where we want to be. And this is just a summary. We're still working on this alternative, and we may want to bid it with the mezzanine, which is the upper storage space, or building B3 as an alternate, just to make sure we come in under budget. But we're still working on some refinements that I think will get us there to where we want to be, right around 20 million. So our next steps are to finalize our value engineering process with the architect and the team. That'll be June and early July. We'll make a recommendation in July to City Council for the design we want to move forward with. And we'll submit our site development application to the planning department. You'll see the supplemental AE consultant contract with Helix. And we will kick ahead with design as fast as possible, and be on our way to building something that the city has needed for a very, very long time. Additional comments?
Just that we need to keep moving forward.
All right, let's start with Rick.
If you go back to the top down, that one, is there anything about doing this and moving the buildings, reducing the retaining walls, that's going to prevent us from using the full site at a later date?
To a point, yes. I mean, you can't move a building, right? You can, but so by what we did here, the building B2, which is on your far, from your side, on your far left, we brought it in, which took a lot of retaining wall. Part of the original foundation had retaining walls in it. So we brought it in closer, so it tightens up. We lose real estate. We lose real estate for adding even just additional parking on the asphalt or gravel, right? That's part of the thing that happens. Same with building B3. By scooting it forward, we saved a lot of money on retaining walls and stuff here. But off down on the low side of the building, you've lost the area that could be potential future parking or future, we shaved 50 feet off this building or 25 feet off this building. In the future, we could have brought that back at that point in time, and still could. We could still add retaining walls in the future there and build it up. So that one you could, over there on B2, be a little bit more challenging to do anything.
Yeah, and that's what kind of when I was reading it without even this drawing, that's what I was sort of afraid of. I would hate that we try to save $1 today and now cost us $5 in the future because we want that real estate. Yeah, the space that's right up on Viking Way on the right side of B3, I mean, that's right on the street. It's probably not as valuable real estate in the future. But south below B3 and to the left of B2, I mean, that could be real estate we want someday, even if it's just parking, even if it's, low cost covered vehicle, pop-up type. So I would be hesitant to cut too deep on that of taking away our future possibilities because we want to save money now. I think we've talked about this many times. This is a 50-year project. We're not coming back in 20 years and doing it again. We're trying to plan for 50 years. So I absolutely appreciate what you've done and trying to save. I think shaving the buildings down works because we can always redo buildings, but I'm a little concerned about not doing the retaining walls, not maximizing the use of the property now in a way that lets us use it in the future.
Gary.
I can speak to that a little more, but Gary, go ahead.
Oh, you should answer the question. It's fine.
We put a lot of thought into it, and when we thought about what was the most important thing, it's the mechanic shop. And so the mechanic shop, when you walk into it, you might think it's oversized for a city our size and the equipment that we have. But it is perfect for our mechanic to be able to work on multiple things and for us to be able to grow. The rest of the areas I look at as covered storage that could be built other places on the site. I know Mike could excavate out some of the area at the end of B3 and add additional parking area or additional covered storage pretty easily. The nature of the shift on building B2, which is the upper building, is very much the same as what we did on the decamp facility to make it affordable as well. I do believe that our team will fill up this building very quickly. If you look at the volume of vehicles that we have and the amount of storage in the storage space, we can pretty much fill it up. The extra storage area of the mezzanine helps maximize the space. So I do believe that there will be some additional vehicle storage built in the next 20 years. We also own quite a bit of property over by the admin building. The other thing that I think about a lot is we went through a rate analysis on our utilities. We're outsourcing solid waste, or I believe we'll be outsourcing solid waste. We just got proposal and response from contractors on Monday. So we're working through that process, and I think there'll be negotiations. But that means some of the additional overhead goes to the utilities that solid waste may be used to pay for. And so we have to look at that financial burden too. And I'm uncomfortable as the Public Works Director taking on an additional $5 million with the enterprise funds in terms of a loan. Although that is something we could do, or the general fund could contribute to. I would ask for more donation or more contribution from the general fund.
So Councilman McVeigh, followed by Councilman Newell.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike and Diane, I just want to make sure with the shifting of the buildings, I can't really read the distance between buildings 1 and 2. So we have some pretty large vehicles. We have enough, you've talked with the architect to ensure we've got enough space between those buildings where the trucks safely to maneuver in the bays and so forth. We're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you take a look at the middle building, it's 75 feet wide. So if you just kind of slide that over to that space there, there's quite a bit of room in there.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you for the reassurance.
Yeah, I appreciate the efforts. I support where you're at this standpoint. I caution my colleagues of building for something 25, 30 years from now by increasing rates and taxes on our customers today. We are already baking in cost increases in our utilities to pay for this as it is. I'm concerned about affordability because we have, over the past 4 years, implemented several new use fees and taxes in that standpoint. So there's a balancing point. Everything comes, there is no free lunch, but so I appreciate where you're at and all the things you're considering on this.
And Rick,
Yeah, just one more question. On the assumption that we divest solid waste, do we anticipate the decant area at any point not then being needed? Like, are we still gonna, is the private contractor still gonna use that area in support of us?
No, we'll be utilizing it as part of our public works operation. So it gives us a little bit more flexibility with everything down there.
So potentially that area, if we do not engineer these areas for expansion, we could eventually use that area.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilman Tabor.
And we were looking at a 27.5% budget overage for the original design, and then you're looking at a 17% approximately reduction in square footage for the alternate. So if that can get us, right, that seems like a good trade to me, like in terms of value, right? If we're cutting off the most expensive parts of the building and we're only losing 17% square footage, but we're saving over 25% on the budget, that makes sense that we're doing that. And then I think the main concern is that that's not destroying operational capacity going 20, 50 years into the future, is it?
No, this plan here, it's a solid 20-year plan.
Any other question, council?
Just a comment. I just agree that we need to move ahead, continue moving ahead swiftly so that costs don't continue to skyrocket.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, I
and
agree.
because Public Works needs this desperately.
Very much so.
Yes, had I talked about what I'm most proud of in my time on council, the purchase of the property for Public Works Phase 1 and the move over there as part of Phase 1 certainly is on my list, and I was going to encourage my colleagues to make sure we complete Phase 2 because it's really important.
I agree.
Any last comment? Mike, Diane?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Very well presented. Thank you. We're moving on to the last stated item of the workshop agenda. That's business. No, we're done. Look at that. We're on to questions and concerns of the council in general. Council. Brett.
Okay, this is pretty random, and maybe I should have just had Public Works stay here. We'll see if there's an answer yet. I was listening to a story the other day on NPR, and it was talking about the fact that approximately 45% of our nation's water supplies have PFAS chemicals, plastics in them. And legally, I think the EPA is requiring public water systems to test for those plastics by 2027. So I went to our website and didn't find anything. So I kind of wanted to ask if there's a plan for that testing, and if so, when.
Yeah, we have tested for PFAS and there's no indication that we have any measurable amount in our water system.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good to know. I'm curious why that doesn't show up on, like, the EPA has an interactive GIS map and some other organizations also have maps, and nothing comes up for Poulsbo at all. There's sort of things for the military sites in
Mhm.
Silverdale, but it doesn't come up for Poulsbo.
That's interesting. We'll look into that.
Okay.
Charlie, do you have anything to add?
Can you reiterate what he said into the mic?
We've done the state testing, what the
Okay,
state
so maybe
requires
if I
us
go
to
the
test.
State, there could be published.
Yeah, because we submit that information to the state
Okay, I
Department
didn't
of
go
Health.
to the Washington State. I kind of just thought it would be on the EPA,
So
but maybe
Britt,
not.
the
Interesting.
KPUD has done extensive testing and some of theirs does touch near the base. So that would be a source as well. The testing they've done, and they've been keeping a close eye on it now for the better part of 10 years. Because I remember being in Washington, D.C. with the cities association, and they were all over it already at that point. KPUD was. So you
Okay.
might want to touch base on their
Yeah,
mapping.
I mean, I'm going to start with the state. It's weird that it's not on the EPA website, but yeah, I'll look. Thank you.
So looking at the next agenda, and it looks like it's pretty heavy, so Gary doesn't want to reconsider and come back next week. But seriously, I saw the county has something coming up to discuss. They put a moratorium on battery energy storage systems, but there was one site that I guess was approved or before that moratorium went in place. It's fairly close to Poulsbo. I had asked our planning director if we had anything like that in the area. We don't have anything approved in the city, but we also don't have any policy on it. So in doing a little research, I don't know if you folks know, these sites are essentially a Connex box as full as it can get of lithium batteries. One of these batteries has a technical shrapnel explosion distance of 140 feet. And it's a Connex full, and it's a site full of Connex boxes full of these batteries. So I don't know if that's something we want to get ahead of and put something in our code that restricts where they can be located, our industrial zones with setback. But I think if we wait till somebody applies to put one in, we're going to be too late. And if the county's already restricted it, that means folks will look to cities. So I just said, I know it's coming up on the county's agenda, and there's a lot of folks that are planning to go and express their opinion on the county letting that happen, not letting it happen, preventing it, whatever. But just because of the potential danger, there was a story about one of them having an incident in the desert. I don't remember if it was Arizona or New Mexico. They called it a fire, but it turned out it wasn't actually nothing caught on fire. The facility just started off-gassing. And when the fire department showed up to investigate, their hazmat readers spiked, and it took 4 hours before they was clear enough that they could go into the site and investigate wearing hazmat suits. So it can get pretty scary. So within our city limits, I think we probably should look at this.
I'll note an item that Rick's remarks, speaking of county announcements, just to note, Commissioner Rolfus put out a notice today for a June 24th Kingston Advisory Committee meeting to explore the question of feasibility study for incorporation of Kingston. So I would just like to note that for the record. Now, I know in the past there's been feasibility studies of incorporation for Silverdale that the end result was working the opposite end of the question. It acted as a prevent or a dissuasion. But I just want to note that came out early this afternoon. A number of us are going to be at AWC in Spokane, but I would note from my colleagues or others, the June 24th meeting at the Green in Kingston to explore that. Any other questions, concerns of the council? We'll move, Gary.
Mayor, it might be worth noting that the city still is accepting applications for the city council opening. Information is on the city website, including the full application. And I believe deadlines for application is June 24th at 4:30 p.m. Correct, Rhiannon?
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
And I'll add that the special meeting of the city council to go over those applications. Any interviews will be July 6th.
And just to confirm, we did put on council's calendars a very long hold, not knowing the number of applicants we would have for interviews. So that will get refined closer to the time after that deadline has occurred.
Speaking of future agenda items, I'll note that Councilman Fitzpatrick is already following in the footsteps of our fast fading Councilman McVeigh, forwarding to us news articles and other references in the fine fashion of Councilman McVeigh. There you go, Gary. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
I sent him an email this afternoon telling him I was hoping he was picking up that banner. And he's even going the extra step of turning them into PDF documents, so.
I'm very stubborn and I have refused to subscribe. So
Well,
sometimes I can.
I'm going to point out that if you have a library card from the Kitsap Regional Library, you can go to their news section and you can read all those articles from the library.
Which is where I'm getting them.
Now, isn't this that point in the evening where Mr. McVeigh's tapping on his watch and saying, Mayor, did you see, let us move on?
That's why we're drawing.
So on that note, any other future agenda items to note? All right, we're going to turn to the continued public comment. So we are once again inviting public comment. If you would come to the podium, state your name and place of residence. We have 3 minutes and your council's anxious to hear from you. Again, or for the first time, or not at all, as the case may be. So calling for public comment. And not seeing any. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Wow.
Second.
Second. And all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned.
6:49, Gary.
That's right. That was all for you.